Say hello, hello. If you are here in the chat, say hi. Hello, hello. Good morning, good evening, everyone. Hi, say hi in the chat if you're there. So lovely to see you all. Hello, 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 hello. I'm going to start with a welcome to country. So it is to acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. They are the traditional custodians of the land on which I am on and which we are meeting virtually today. I'd like to pay my respects to their elders past and present, and to extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here today. I am based in Sydney, which is why my welcome to country is of the Gadigal people, but we've got people joining us from all over Australia. So for those of you who are joining us live on Zoom, please pop your questions and comments in the chat and also on the Q&A. For those who are on YouTube, you can also use the chat there. So welcome along. My name is Danielle Stein Fairhurst. I am a Microsoft MVP. I'm a financial modelling specialist, and I am your virtual meetup host for today. So I've been running regular sessions like this for the past couple of years, and I do really enjoy bringing speakers from all over the world on topics that are useful for financial modelers. And today we have got a most illustrious panel for you. So since I've been running these sessions, Lance Rubin has been one of our most popular presenters. So I'm going to hand over to Lance now, and he is going to be your moderator for today and hopefully keep everybody in line. So I'll hand over to you, Lance.
Thanks, Danielle, and thanks for the introduction. The chat is disabled, so we'll probably just enable that. Welcome, everyone. As Danielle said, my name is Lance Rubin. I'm the CEO and founder of Model Citizen and now Excel Cloud as well. And I'm an ex-virtual CFO. I spent a lot of time in that space, but it's a topic I'm very passionate about. And what we're going to do today is really get an understanding of why it's important to understand what do CFOs do. Let's not get hung up about words, and you can call it whatever we want, but we want to actually get to the nub of what it is we should be doing. What is it we should be selling, how we should be selling it, what we should be doing. And my esteemed panelists have all got extensive experience in this space, or either related or adjacent to it. And so I'm really looking forward to it. What we're going to do is we're going to actually run a number of live polls. It's going to be very interactive. We want really participation by everyone. So we're going to run a warm-up poll. Straight after that warm-up poll, I'm going to go to each of the panelists to introduce themselves, as well as give an initial view of what they see in the polls. Then we're going to do specific poll questions to the panelists, and then we're going to go off polls and just do a general wrap up and round out. Please, if you've got any questions, put them through in the Q&A. Chat is hard to monitor, but of course, feel free to banter and do all sorts of peanut gallery comments are welcome. Of course, just not to me. So I'm going to jump straight into the poll. Danielle's also going to be monitoring some of the questions as well, and she'll jump in from time to time. So if you don't have, if you have a screen or you have a phone available, go to menti.com and you should see the screen now, www.menti.com. And you can use the code 5574 1553. Thank you, Danielle. That's perfect for sharing that in the chat. And what we should be doing is really getting some interaction and people coming through. So I'm going to flick to the first question. And this is the key one, right? It's a bit of a word cloud. It's really, how can CFOs add value to clients? An important one because, a lot of people have different views on what adding value actually means. What does value mean? What does value for the client mean? What is value for us as CFOs, as accountants, as bookkeepers? But the most important thing is how are we actually adding value to our clients? So just enter in a word. It'll pop up. You should be able to get into Menti either through a browser or through your phone. And let's get it rolling. So we've got a couple of comments there. It's really useful. And look, as Danielle said, I'm also a financial modeler. That is kind of my core strength, capability. That's what I love doing. I do very little CFO work these days, but I do work with a lot of CFOs. I do help a lot of CFOs. So it's really interesting to see some of these words pop up. Budget, actual, financial discipline, aligned to business strategy is great. But of course, all of these things are really going to help our panelists and really shape the conversation that we're going to have. Get the numbers right. Oh my God, I think that's one thing that we probably can all agree on the panel. Like, if you don't get the numbers right, forget adding any value. And that in itself is valuable, absolutely. I was wondering when cash flow was going to come up biggest. So it's great to see that, because I think, if you ain't focused on cash, cash is king. Cash is also a balance sheet item. So it's important to understand cash. So that is fantastic. Okay, that's a nice little warm up. What we're going to do next is flick to the next question, which is what are we going to focus on, and what services do we want to call it? Does it matter? Is it important? So I think it's a real challenging one, which I think this is partly why we have this debate, because the thing we get all hung up on is the name, and then that just confuses clients. So, it's a fascinating poll. Don't care what you call it. I like it. Obviously, Rob's got his brand associated with Outsourced CFO, so he's probably quite happy with the change in tides. None of these, would be great to think about what sort of. I must admit, I'm not a great fan of virtual CFO. I'm not a great fan of fractional. It sends the wrong message. You're expensive if you're not there. You're virtual reality. I know that's the word we've been stuck for a long time. It's not on brand for me. Fractional, sorry, Michael, I don't like as well, because it just finds it's all bitsy. It's not combined and all the rest. But let's not get too hung up about the name, but let's absolutely nail the content and the purpose. And that's what this panelist discussion is about. It's not about the name. It's actually about what are we going to be doing and what are we going to be offering for people. So what do you think the core deliverable role or function for this type of service is? This is so important. Like, what is the core competency of this service or the people that are doing it? So hopefully we get quite a good result in terms of focus of what we think we should be doing. Oh, Danielle, you'll be happy. There's some people that think financial modeling is cool. That's great.
So we can only vote once on this one, yeah?
Yes. Sorry. No shifting the results with multiple votes or stacking the result.
Wow.
And I find this fascinating, and I'd love Lielette to crack into this one when she gets there. 0% providing bookkeeping, but actually, I have to say, I think a lot of what people say is CFO services, a lot of it actually comes down to just quasi highly charged bookkeeping services. But we won't be too controversial too early. But that's certainly one of the things that I get frustrated when I see people calling themselves CFOs when in actual fact they're not doing what CFOs should be doing. And so we can certainly look into that.
I think we might be huge here, Lance, because we've got a lot of, I know we've got a lot of financial modelers on the line today. So I would expect a few answers there. So
software, a lot of the time we get all hung up about software. We get all software focused. What tools we're using. Of course, we're using accounting software, 100%. That's a given. But what other stuff are we using? What ancillary tools are we using around the data? If we're using
Excel.
Information.
Yeah.
No, Excel's in there as well.
Oh, it is
Excel native. You've got yeah. So I want to really want to understand what people are using, and it's fascinating to see what people are using overall. There's a native Excel, and there's an Excel with a couple of add-ins there as well. Excel Cloud being one. Excel for Mac as well. So Excel for native Microsoft is different, Rob, and I'll have a go at you for this one. Native Excel versus Excel format, they're actually different applications. Power BI, wow, 15%, that I didn't expect. So that's pretty impressive. So really important to understand these aspects around add-ins, technology, and using Google Sheets. I'm glad this. If you want a good debate on Google versus Excel, Danielle, I think you did a meetup not too long ago with the battle. Actually, quite impressive. Actually, I think it was tipped towards the Google Sheets because I think people were so impressed with what Google Sheets actually can do versus Excel. But I think if you're a proper financial modeler, Excel's your tool. But yeah, fascinating. Native Excel wins again. So hopefully no big surprises there. So last question before we sort of go to panelists. Should CFOs have formal qualifications, or should anyone with business experience and accounting experience be able to provide the service? So, you don't really have to become a qualified CFO to do this work. You could have a Bachelor of Commerce. You could even be someone from the Navy, Michael, and who's worked in submarines, and then come and done some CFO work. So I think this is a really important topic, because as the world evolves towards this type, and there's no question there's a demand for it, but there's no formalized qualification. And is that a problem or not? So I think that'd be a great thing to discuss. Sorry, one more thing. How important is a skill like financial modeling and analysis for CFO services? Danielle's been great at hosting us on this. This is obviously not entirely focused on financial modeling and analysis, but of course a core part of what we do is, as CFOs, in my mind, and it'll be interesting to see what people think, is that sort of work. And it is important to at least embrace insight, embrace decision-making, bank strategic thinking. If we're not looking forward, what are we doing? Financial modeling is about looking forward, and analysis as well. Analytics is also forward-looking, not just financial modeling. What do you mean by financial modeling and analysis? We can do a whole webinar on that. But as I said, analytics versus financial modeling, same but different. There are some nuances, slightly different tools in some cases. Data
That's
sets,
a really good topic, and I don't think we've really addressed that one properly. We should think about that.
Let's do it. Let's do it, Danielle. Let's absolutely do it. So it's great. So right, so I'm going to come off screen share, and I'm going to let our esteemed panelists firstly introduce themselves. What do they think of some of those results that came off that poll? To really think about what are the aspects that resonate, what do they have exception to, and I'd love to start with you, Lielette, ladies first. Brief introduction and just sort of initial thoughts on what you saw on some of those results.
Sure, great. Thanks, Lance. Wow, that were really good questions to get the juices flowing this morning, that's for sure. So hi, everyone, and welcome. So I am Lielette Calleja. I'm the founder and director of All That Counts. I have been running a bookkeeping, so to speak, business for almost 18 years. It's almost 2 decades. So I have seen a lot of changes. My background, though, what makes me a little bit different to others is that I do come from a management accounting, financial controller, business analyst background, and I've worked with some of the great CFOs in the world in multinationals as well. So I believe I come from a two-tone approach here, where I understand what good quality bookkeeping is, and I have so much respect for the CFOs, whether they're in small business or multinationals or government or whatever it is. So what really alarmed me, which I was really, I guess I was impressed to see, is that most of you thought, almost 90% thought that CFO was about strategy, which I believe it is. So, and this is where, and I was pleasantly surprised to not see that people thought bookkeeping was in the mix of CFO, because it's so removed from it. And I hope today's discussion I can add some value as to where I see the delineation of those tour and how a really good bookkeeper can help CFOs shine as well. So thanks everyone, and let's get, I'll pass the stage on to whoever.
Thanks, Lielette. Why don't we go furthest from us, Michael in the US. So thanks, Michael. I know it's quite late there for you, and a bit of a background and your thoughts, and of course, context of what you do.
Yeah, sure. So you kind of spoiler alert a little bit. I actually started my professional career as a nuclear engineer, watching nuclear power plants operate safely on submarines, and through a weird chain of events, after 11 years, I decided it was time to do something else. Got into the business world and realized that my passion was more around business. But one of the things that I learned as I got into the business world is that a lot of the people that do some of the tactical financial things, like bookkeepers and accountants, oftentimes had a hard time kind of translating what they were seeing into terms that business owners could understand and leverage to make smarter decisions. And so I went to business school and got all the degrees and those kind of things, and have really, for the last almost 7 years now, my passion has been teaching business owners how to understand their numbers so they can make better decisions. When I started this 7 years ago, we didn't really have fractional CFOs or virtual or outsource or any of those things. It was just so kind of uncommon, and the service has kind of morphed into that over the last 6.5 years or so. The data was interesting. I've got to agree with Lielette. It was interesting because I also, in addition to having a CFO firm, and we're pushing nearly $100 million in management under the firm. So I've got a lot of experience with small and big businesses. I also have another business called The Connected Accountant, where I coach fractional CFOs on how to start, scale, and optimize their firms. And I think there's this interesting disparity between the lack of, like, the people that admitted bookkeeping was part of the virtual or the fractional CFO game, and just the volume of people I see offering CFO services in the market that are really just talking about, I mean, at the core of it, it's just accounting. So I find that it's interesting. Maybe we've just got a bunch of awesome people that get it here on the call, and so we're kind of preaching to the choir. But I would venture to say that maybe isn't actually the case. So I'm really interested to kind of see how the conversation tonight progresses, and I think the key thing for me, the big thing I want to get out of this is to learn how we can all work together to deliver a better product for our clients at the end of the day. So I got a pen and paper here to take notes and learn some things. So thank you very much for having me, Lance. I'll turn it back to you.
Thanks, Michael. Rob, over to you.
Thanks, Lance. So I'm a chartered accountant and also a tax agent, and the principal at Outsourced CFO, which I established after many years, probably about 18, 19 now, as a controller and CFO in both corporates and SMEs. So, that's very much, I guess, similar to Lielette. My background is I've come from commerce and industry, and now moving back into practice. And we provide, I guess, a little bit different to Lielette and Mike. We provide a full finance function, including virtual CFO services for startups and small to medium-sized businesses that can't justify that permanent or full-time resource. So it's part of our service offering, our CFO services, but it is only a part of. So it supplements some of our accounting services, and in other respects, other clients we have are only interested in our CFO services. But as Michael said earlier, very keen to understand the delineation between those various roles, and help to sort of educate the broader market around the distinction between each of those. So also looking forward to the discussion here.
Rob, was there anything on the results that you found interesting on what you saw?
Yeah, look, I think that early question around what it should be called was, and you sort of put a few things out there, a few comments there. It's interesting because we as a firm, we actually refer to it as virtual CFO. The downside with that, because I actually agree with what you said, is that some people think that we only operate remotely when we talk about virtual CFO, and that we never see clients in person, which of course is not the case. On the fractional CFO reference, I think that probably makes a little bit more sense in terms of what it is, but I don't think there's been as much take up here in Australia as what there might be in the US. Outsourced CFO, as you said, we don't use that because our firm is outsourced CFO, so that would just be confusing. But it's very much a case of what it is. So that was interesting for me. The other piece around the sort of deliverables that should come out of this the service is the strategic. But I think that I absolutely agree with. So that wasn't a surprise. And then I guess second to that, the financial modeling, I also agree with it because that's a critical forward-looking tool that is required in order to provide virtual CFO or CFO services. So probably not too much of a surprise there. And in terms of the qualification bit, yeah, I can't remember the exact result there, but I think it actually, there should be a combination of both the core qualifications, so whether that's a CA or CPA, as well as X number, let's say 10 years of commercial experience that combined should make somebody competent in providing CFO services. So that's probably our views around some of those questions.
Great, thanks. So if you want to see the poll results, obviously you can go back to Menti. We will share those afterwards, either through emails or otherwise. But let's get into some harder hitting specific questions for the panelists. So these are specific questions that people are going to vote on, but equally, you know, we want to go around the grounds with this. So this is probably one of the things that is most controversial in this space is should CFO services be commingled with bookkeeping, accounting, finance, tax, and other compliance services? So I love a great GIF. I love a great emoji. And really to try and think about this. It can be quite confusing sometimes, but there's some people that have very strong views in this. And of course, it's a bit of a mixed bag. And what I'd really like the panelists to think about is the results of this in their own context. And you know, we really want to, you know, have a view on some of these aspects, because I think this is where the confusion happens. This is where what we are telling our clients, what we are telling our staff, what we are telling the market about what we're actually providing is important. Because if we're saying something and we're doing something different, then we're not only creating confusion, we're creating disruption, we're depleting the value of what a CFO should be doing, and really it becomes quite complex. And then, you know, people feel ripped off. And so, you know, someone else is trying to then sell that service and say, well, I've already got, my accountant already is doing my CFO work. You know, if you don't have that, Danielle shared the poll again, thanks. And the link with that. I'm actually going to keep this up to see how it evolves, but I'll start with in reverse order, Rob. You know, you call yourself an outsourced CFO. You actually provide all of those services, as you said. What do you think?
Yeah, look, I agree with the majority there. Very much dependent on client needs is what our response would be. As you said, we provide an end-to-end service. Our focus, however, is very much on our virtual CFO or CFO services. And the reason why I say it depends on the client needs is because if you're a startup or you're a client that perhaps not so sure about their bookkeeper, I think in that case, bringing on a provider that can provide all of these services is very valuable. You know, startups want to sort of get off the ground. they want to make some progress, and you know, having to knock on a whole lot of different doors to get relevant advisors on board does delay that. Whereas if if they come to us, we can say, well, look, you know, we can help you with your bookkeeping and help you with your tax, but we can actually give you some really value-added strategic insights through our CFO services. Whereas I would say clients that have a very solid bookkeeper, you know, that employ the likes of Lielette and her team, those are you know, those guys, we don't need to bundle our services. They can come to us just for CFO services, you know, and we can very easily see, you know, if the client's not sure right at the beginning, oh, well, we're not actually sure about the bookkeeping, we can assess that very quickly by just looking at their file and looking at the volume of sort of tax adjustments that happen at year end as to whether or not they have competency in that respect. So yes, we firmly believe that it does depend on the client needs. So I do agree with nearly 50% majority that's.
But isn't that the problem, right? Isn't that the problem? Because then you're saying, well, you know, the client wants it. I'm not really good at it, so I'm going to do it anyway. Lielette, what do you think about? And I've seen this myself, right? People are not prepared to share the wallet. We've had situations where bookkeepers are doing quasi CFO, calling it CFO work. CFO's doing what they say CFO work, but it's actually bookkeeping when you look under the hood. I think that's the problem. I actually think that stat is the problem that we have right now. Lielette, what do you think?
Yeah, that's whilst I thought the audience was very smart with the first result, I think they're equally just as smart, but I disagree. It doesn't depend on what the client wants at all, because in my experience, in my 18 years of experience, the client never knows what they want. That is our job, to work out what they need versus what they think they need. And there's a lot of education that needs to be done in the marketplace. Looking at some of the comments in the chat, it's obvious that not even us as an industry are 100% convinced as to what CFO is. So how the hell are our clients, our businesses supposed to know when there's so many fancy words being thrown around: virtual, outsource, fractional. And then you've got bookkeeping, which has in Australia, it has a connotation that it's just bookkeeping, and it is so much more. And I don't like to see it wrapped up in CFO as the same. I don't like to see CFO wrapped up in bookkeeping as well. To me, it does depend on the size of the business. So when we talk about depends on client needs, I think for me, it really depends on the size of the business, the life cycle of the business as well, because you also need different types of CFOs. If you're a CFO that specialises in startups and getting funding and all that stuff, and joint venture acquisition, all those things, that's the type of CFO you need. If you've got a coach that you've had your business going for 10 years, but you now need to change things up a little bit, then you need a CFO that has that experience with turning businesses around. So for me, it's all about, I won't just go to a one-stop shop and go, right, this is the CFO we use. I look at the business acumen behind them. And this is where I do believe qualifications aren't always necessarily important, that they don't have to be a CPA, CA. And sometimes for me, it's better that I'm working with a CFO who understands business and growth. And because at the end of the day, businesses want to put more money in their pockets. They want to add more money to their bottom line. They want to build an asset as well, build wealth. And that's where I believe a CFO can help. Bookkeeping has progressed, absolutely. And on behalf of all the bookkeepers here, in Australia, we have to, most bookkeepers are BAS agents as well. So we do that part of tax, which is BAS. We also do management accounting as well. So every business should be getting management accounting reports. And every bookkeeper should know how to prepare a forecast, a budget, a cash flow. So if they're not doing that, then that's probably where the CFO comes in, because I can do all that. But really, a CFO should be doing so much more than budgeting, forecasting.
Lielette,
look, I mean, unpopular opinion, no doubt, but I'm not here.
It is. I'm going to call you on it because you've got that experience. You've had the financial control background. You know how to prepare management reports. You've got that experience. I don't think that's the majority of bookkeepers.
It's
I
not.
think majority of bookkeepers should stay, what they're good at. And for those that can, yes, but I don't think that's the view. Michael, what do you think about Lielette's comment about bookkeepers doing management reporting and budgeting and forecasting?
So it's a great question. I love this conversation. It's so intriguing to hear the different perspectives. I take a different kind of perspective than I think everybody else on here. Instead of the question being, should you offer these things together? I think the first question is, do you even want to offer those things together? Because there's this combination, I think, that should exist before you define your services between competency, which is what the conversation has been focused primarily on so far, but also interest. So as a firm owner, are you even interested in offering, if you're an accountant, are you even interested in offering advisory services? If you're a CFO, are you interested in offering bookkeeping or compliance services? So I think the question you got to start with is, are you even interested in offering those kinds of services? And then from there, we can kind of get into like the rest of the stuff, because at the end of the day, like as business owners, that's one of the great freedoms that we have, is deciding what we want to do. I don't necessarily think that it's a question of should you. Now, absolutely, there's some considerations to be made around the stage of the business and the industry that they're in. A lot of times, the truth is, if you're working with a brand new startup, they want that all in one package. They just want that one person that they can go to, that they know can handle the books, they can handle the taxes, and they can also do some of the advisory things like modeling and forecasts and projections. They can have some conversations about strategy. They just want that. And so if you're in that world, I think a lot of times, particularly if they don't have funding yet, then it's going to be hard for them to afford somebody to handle the tactical work and then pay you for the strategic work. So I think it really just kind of depends. I think you get to a point, though, where a business of sufficient size, and I'm going to kind of just throw out an arbitrarily picked number. If a business starts to get somewhere in that, let's call it multiple seven figures range, so $2, $3, $4, $5 million, then there's a point somewhere in there that they need to be handled by different people, right? If for no other reason, for internal controls and some things like that, checks and balances, I think that it just makes sense that they're handled by separate people. And I think at that point, they should not be commingled, particularly around like an internal controls perspective, but aside from that piece of it, I think it's really just up to you and where your interests are. I know a lot of people that really enjoy the tactical kind of work, and they enjoy the strategic work. So if you have the interest and the competency, then by all means go for it. But I think the other important thing that I'll hit home here is know who you are and what you do, and don't try to be something else. All right, just be okay with
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Who you are.
Because the kind of to Lielette's point, I think there's like this, maybe a stigma is the right word, that bookkeeping services and accounting and compliance services somehow they're less than, and that's just kind of bullshit. Without that work being done with excellence, the strategic work just doesn't happen. It's trash. And so I think we've got to remove the stigma that people that are doing compliance work is less than, and that somehow advisory work is better than or greater than. They're two very different skills. They're two very needed skills as part of the team.
Yeah, absolutely, Michael. And there's a great saying, garbage in, garbage out, right? If you can't even get your books right, forget doing anything else. That is great. So we're going to move on to the next one for round two. I often see this, and I often get really frustrated by people saying, yeah, I do, I use this software, I use that software, we've got some great dashboards, and and that's kind of CFO services. And we've got to be really careful. And I some of the software vendors out there make people get accredited to be business advisors because you learned their software. And I think this one is equally a cause for the confusion, for the misrepresentation, And actually the clients think that they're buying the software. They think that they're buying the management report. They think that they're buying these things. And that's the part of the CFO services, these pretty apps. Michael, I'll come back to you because I think you made a very good point there around getting the numbers right and thinking about the services. But like, to what extent do you see software playing a role in all of this? Because it's really a bit of the Wild West, to be frank.
I can tell I'm watching the graph change real time. I think I'm going to be the contrarian on this, just based on the 70, what is that, almost 80% that say it's important. I think it's almost completely irrelevant. I was probably the one guy that put barely relevant in many cases. And I'll tell you why. I think the most essential non-commoditized service that fractional CFOs provide isn't the models, it's not the forecast and the projections, it's actually their perspective, right? If you want to separate yourself from everyone else in the market, if you want to be able to charge those higher prices, what your clients are really paying you for is what you see in the data and how in your ability to translate that into actionable information that they can use to move their business forward. So if you want to use Power BI, or if you want to use whatever software you want to use, if it's Fathom, if it's Jira, whatever it might be, that's all great. Anyone can do that, or very many people can do that. I think your ability to tell the story with what you're seeing in the particular software and translate that into actionable information through your perspectives, your experience in business, that's what matters.
Great. Rob, your thoughts on the whole software piece?
It's so interesting to hear what Michael just said. And the reason is I've got a very different answer, but for the very same reason. And I'll tell you what I mean by that is I think it is somewhat important. So I, again, agree with the 50% majority here. But I actually have the same reason as Michael, in that I think that the software is a tool that can be leveraged to ensure that accurate outcomes are delivered. And without the software, things will just take longer, and the focus would very much be on the number crunching rather than the storytelling and the strategic planning. And that's where I agree with Michael. That's where the focus needs to be. But the absence of the software would take time away from that storytelling, from that planning, and you'd be focused on the number crunching. Whereas with the software, you can use it as a tool that you can leverage. So I think it is somewhat important. I don't know if that resonates.
I'm probably somewhere in the middle. I believe data is king, how you get that data, but I also believe that most of the audience said, they use Excel and Power BI compared to any of the off-the-shelf products, which tells me a lot of stuff as well, that they're actually looking at stuff outside of financial metrics. They're looking at non-operating, non-financial data. And hopefully that's what they're doing, because I believe a good CFO looks at the business in totality, not only the numbers. So they need to understand business from start to finish, what it does. And being buried in numbers is not good for a CFO. A CFO needs to be able to look at a report and know exactly, that's my interpretation anyway. So having those distinct, being removed from the software, if the bookkeeping or the accountant, whatever the size of the business, whatever services they're using, as long as the data is accurate, CFO should have access to that data, but should they be buried and being heavily involved? And this is what I'm seeing. I'm seeing accountants, bookkeepers calling themselves CFOs, but all they're doing is producing a set of reports out of the system and handing it to their client. I wouldn't even call it CFO, but my clients call me that. And I don't like to take that label because I don't think I am that. But I am having robust conversations. I am talking to them. The data is there, but we very rarely look at it. It's the questions I ask that I get answers from, and then that enables them to think about what they're going to do in the future. Do they need to change their pricing? Do they need to change their marketing strategy? So all those things that have nothing to do with bookkeeping. It's really about asking questions and getting answers. But knowing the data, I go into every meeting knowing the numbers. I don't lead with the reports. That's how I work. So yeah, that's where I don't actually think that the data is key here. The data is key, but the tools are not for a CFO.
Yep, I'll throw my 2 cents in. I think it is somewhat important to Rob's point. I wouldn't say
financial modelling.
Not important,
yes.
But
yes.
Yeah, I mean,
financial modelling.
That's
different. I look at that as something different.
Yeah, but I mean, financial modeling can still be done in many different tools. I think that's more of a skill as opposed to a tool. But and a software. Yes, 90% of financial models are built in Excel, so you could say yes, Excel's the software. But I do think that in order to get better insight and application, so I think, Michael, your point around the value of those things, how you use them is more important than the thing itself. So look, we're going to sort of not do any more polls, but we're going to really crack into some really hard-hitting questions that I'm going to pass to the panelists. And please feel free to raise any questions on the Q&A as well. I see there's a lot of banter in the chat and really good. Danielle, if there's anything that you've seen there that you want to bring out, or I know there's a couple of really good ones. So if there's anything there, just feel free. We'll maybe come back after this question to see if there's anything.
Yeah, there's some fantastic stuff going on in the chat. No specific questions that I need to be raised specifically.
Yes, Michael, I noticed that. I noticed, how the hell can you post and talk at the same time? I'm like, holy crap, this guy's got like 4 arms or something. Or he's got someone else in the background doing stuff. So that threw me. That threw me as well. So getting into let's say you're a business, you're providing, or you're in corporate, kind of similar to what Lielette and Rob were many years ago, and you're wanting to provide the service. What tips do you have for someone looking to provide CFO services, or business, often referred to as business advisory as well? Because I do think business advisory actually probably explains the services a bit more and a bit clearer and better than the other terms. But of course, you could be doing business advisory in all different forms, not necessarily as a CFO per se. But what tips do you have as panel members? Michael, I know you were looking to provide there a sec. You run a training business to help CFOs. What are the sort of tips that you give to people wanting to get into the space? You're on mute. Sorry, Michael. You're on mute. It had to happen to someone on the panel. I was like, well, you can't go through without it.
Amateur hour over here, right? Welcome to my first thing. I would say that there's 2 things that you really should focus on if you're coming from corporate, getting into fractional CFO. Number 1 is you've got to become a storyteller with data. There's really no way around it. And I think that that's where a lot of people struggle or ultimately fall short. Is we understand how to produce the data, we understand how to make the reports, but being able to connect that to a business owner's goals, dreams, and aspirations, and tell the story of what they need to do differently about it, that's what's going to separate you and ultimately determine if you're going to have a career as a fractional CFO or not. And I think that the other skill that I see people needing to focus on is emotional intelligence and the ability to relate to people and understand where they're at a given time and be able to kind of adapt real time. Because the reality is, if you're going to help somebody make those smarter decisions in their business and show them strategies, you've got to be super connected to where kind of they're at right now. Because if you go out and just pumping data as an example, and you're telling like, this is wrong, you got to do this different, and they're in a place where let's just be honest, there's a lot of vulnerability that comes with business ownership. If they're in a place where they've just been beaten down, you've got to be aware of that. You've got to be kind of change and adapt real time. And a lot of times for those, look, I'm not an accountant by trade, but I'm a nuclear engineer. I'm a numbers nerd to the core. And a lot of times for those of us that are analytical and data driven and numbers related, it's hard for us to pick up on those cues that we've got to interact with people a little differently. So I would say the financial storytelling and leveling up emotional intelligence, critical skills if you want to get into the fractional CFO game and make a career out of it. I bet y'all weren't expecting that. The emotional intelligence.
Michael, that is, and there's a comment. I now 100% agree with Colin. I think you've absolutely nailed it, and the central issue. Rob, Lielette, either one of you, I've come from a corporate world into that space. I did the same thing. What are your thoughts, Lielette? I've seen that you're off mute first. What are your thoughts? What are your tips for someone wanting to get into the space?
I think you've got to take a leadership stand as well, most definitely, and be confident and partner with all the stakeholders. That to me is very important. In the small business, I can't speak yet. Emotional intelligence, empathy, all that stuff. I mean, that goes without saying. But yeah, I think it's really important to be that leader, be seen as that leader, and be that confident person. And you can back yourself when you are working with businesses to help them with their strategy. Being a numbers person is very important, analytical mind as well. So I think that is important because, yeah, you need to be able to read data, whether that's you preparing them or whether you need to interpret it as well. So there's no right or wrong answer there. But for me, it's more about having that confidence to back yourself and to lead with leadership.
That's great, Lielette. So Rob, I think there's resounding agreement that it's beyond just the numbers. So how do you do some of that? Maybe if you've got any other tips to offer, that transition out of in corporate where you're sort of doing the numbers or you're professional services, as I was for many years at PwC and KPMG, you get out and now you've got to have empathy, be a leader, understand things, tell stories. These are not qualifications that you get when you leave corporate world. It's certainly not qualifications you get when you leave any of the certification bodies and the accreditation bodies. So what do you actually do? What are your tips in terms of someone getting into that space?
Well, I think it's what I said earlier around when you asked the question around qualification. What should result in the qualified CFO? The combination of having the core competencies through acquiring your CA or CPA or whatever accounting qualification, and the experience that one needs in that role is so critical. I think if you come from a corporate background, or even if you come from if you've been in practice, if you've been a practitioner all your life, you have a very different lens to the corporate environment. And I think being able to look at things from a business perspective and from a commercial perspective, to provide solutions and to tell that story from the business owner's perspective, to identify where are the risks, which are the areas they need to focus on, and how do they do those things. Small medium enterprise doesn't have a wealth of resources, so one needs to make sure that your solutions and your offerings are not just theoretical, that they can actually put them into practice, and you can actually deliver those results. So I think the experience is key in terms of being able to provide a solution, and the practical component of that, providing a solution that a business can relate to, rather than just saying, well, you need to have this report and that report, and then you need to do this, and you need a segregation over here, and you need to do this system. It's just too much. So providing a solution that is fit for purpose, I think, is the other key core component to successful CFO services.
Yeah, great. Danielle, you found an interesting question in the Q&A that you wanted to at least read out or share.
Yeah, we've got a couple of lots of love for all these comments happening in the chat. There's a couple of questions in the Q&A. One from Rajesh asking about resources sector, whether that is we've kind of mentioned, you know, a lot of the things, the role of the CEO and the CFO in the future, but is that different for the resources sector compared to the commercial services industry? What do you guys think?
Anyone want to take that? I'm not a resources expert, but I've obviously built models in project finance and renewable energy and the like, and certainly, you know, built models in that sector. But I don't know if anyone's got specific resources.
Yeah, from
experience.
a modeling perspective, there are certain things that are a little different.
Absolutely.
And I would imagine that from a CFO perspective, you do need to know the industry. Any other comments from the panel on that?
Can you say the question again? I was trying to, when you say sector, you mean like industry?
Yeah. So
resources mining. Sorry, Danielle, go.
No, that's okay. Yeah, just resources in terms of mining. Is that different to commercial or services industries?
I'm not the guy to answer that question.
That's okay. We'll move on to the next one. Yeah, just a question from Gerard. Is it true that providers of accounting services want to offer CFO services to their clients, but the clients don't want to pay for that? I wonder if you guys have ever heard had that.
That's a great question, Gerard.
All the time. Yeah, all the time. But the problem I see though is that accounting services want to offer. So yeah, going back to you, Michael, you've got to want to do it. So wanting to do it and being able to do it are two different things. So I've worked with accounting firms who have said, oh, you know, we'll do the CFO. And when I look at what they're delivering, I'm like, this is nothing more than management accounting. So of course the client's not going to pay the big dollars you're quoting because they don't see value in it. So if they see value in what they're getting and they're seeing a shift in their business and you're actually helping them with their business, whether that's, you know, not every business wants to grow, maybe it's just to become more profitable, whatever it is, or go into different markets. That's where I think accounting firms are missing the link here, what CFO truly is. So that's why people aren't buying the services. And they're saying, and they're like, well, bookkeeping service, I'm actually getting everything I need from that at probably half the price. So that's the problem. And this is why there is a massive shift with accounting firms now wanting to bring in bookkeeping into the fold as well.
I think there's a couple of things you have to consider there. Oh, am I good, Lance?
Yeah, no, I was pointing to you, mate. All good.
Okay, great. You're right behind my camera, so I can't actually see you. I can only hear you. I think there's a couple of things that come into play there, right? So number one is when you say they want the service, they don't want to pay for the service. So on one hand, let's just go ahead and say it out loud. As an industry, we kind of suck at sales and marketing. We're not really good at communicating and helping people understand the value that we provide. So as an industry, we've got to learn how to communicate the value that we provide better, or you're going to hit that objection all the time, right? I just don't know. And so we've got to level up our competency in communicating value, and that's just marketing better. On the other side, you've got to consider the client. So if you're working with a business that's doing, I'll make up a number, 200,000 a year in revenue, absolutely, they may see some of these advisory services that you offer. They may want those insights, but they simply can't afford it. Right. And so they want it, and it may not be an issue that they aren't willing to pay for it. They may not just be big enough yet where they can pay for it. And so both of those things kind of have to be weighted out. So I think, like, to summarize it, right messaging, but also right clients. And when those two things come together, you're going to get people that are willing to pay.
Absolutely, Michael. And I think that's the challenge. And Lielette, you nailed it. I think if you're mis-selling or you're not selling the right thing, no wonder they won't pay for it. Because you haven't articulated, well, what's in it for me with them, right? What's in it for me and why should I pay it? What is the basis of me paying those expensive services if all you're giving is a pretty dashboard on an app, which I think is part of the challenge. Rob, what do you think about not wanting to sell it and then not paying for it, because you do that a lot, right? You've got that sort of packaged service.
Yeah, look, I think it comes down to the delineation between the various roles. And, the only issue that is bigger than bookkeepers doing CFO work and billing on that basis is bookkeepers doing CFO work and not billing on that basis. So when bookkeepers represent as competent in CFO work, and the business is not paying for CFO work but believes they're getting CFO services, that is just a recipe for disaster. And that is no disrespect to bookkeepers, because like Michael said earlier, I think it is a critical starting foundation that one needs to provide strong CFO services. So is to have that bookkeeping function in place. But one needs to define what each role is and how each role relates to each other. So one of the first things that we do when taking on a new client is to do a financial systems review. And we've seen things like, CapEx in the P&L and OpEx in the balance sheet and incorrect sales tax rates applied to transactions and poor working capital management and a myriad of other errors that would not occur if there was a virtual or outsourced CFO in place. So it's very much a case of we have different roles, we have different services, and whether that is within a company like ourselves or with different companies like my other members of the panel, it's clear that each party understands and, more importantly, articulates to the business owner what they do and what falls into their space versus what falls into the other space. So, rather than just sort of masquerading as doing everything. So whilst we can do everything, we still know that this falls into our bookkeeping space, or this falls into our compliance, or this falls into our CFO space. So that's our perspective.
Great. So look, we've got 3 minutes left. I've got one more question I want to add and round out before we sort of there's another great couple of questions on the Q&A. Michael, you wanted me to ask this question. I think it's a great question. Is how should fractional service providers, be it bookkeepers, accountants, or CFOs, work together to best service the clients? Because I think this is the rub, right? It's share of wallet. It's not thinking about the client need. It's I've got an unprofitable compliance business. I'm going to do bookkeeping. But actually, it would be better to do something else with someone else who's more proficient in it. What does good collaboration look like? Michael, I'll go to you first because, of course, it was your question initially, and I think it's a great question of how do we collaborate in this space? Because clearly we need to. We're doing stuff which is devaluing our industry.
Yeah, I think the key thing is we've got to stop operating in silos. Right now, each of those functions tends to operate independent of one another. And it's easy to do that, particularly when you've got, a firm that's only doing the CFO piece. You got another firm that's doing the bookkeeping or the accounting piece. It's very easy to get siloed and just kind of focus within your particular scope of work. So I think collaboration and communication have to be at the heart of the whole thing, because at the end of the day, we've all got to work together to make sure that the client, the strategies we're providing are driving the client in the direction they want to go. So for my firm, as an example, we tell our clients that we're kind of the quarterback. I don't know if you guys in Australia know the reference there, but it's like the captain
fullback.
of the financial team, so to speak, right? We're the quarterback of all that. So what we're doing is we're making sure that the other functions are aware and aligned with the client's goals. So it's really always going back to those goals, making sure that as we lay out the strategies, that the tactics are in line with those and that the rest of the team understands why those are there. Because without that, you start having people that are all of us in a little bit different direction, and the client loses ultimately at the end of the day.
Excellent. Rob, your thoughts?
Yeah,
collaboration. Look, I mean, you obviously do a number of that, so maybe you're anti-collaboration because you can do it all.
No, look, the first thing is I think there needs to be acknowledgement or realization of the respective roles, and that those roles, those individuals, whether it's individuals within a single firm or in multiple firms, need to maintain that laser focus on their role, and they need to put their hand up if something falls into the space of another fractional role. So I was just having a look in the chat, and David actually said very well that you know, it's ethically wrong for a firm or an individual to provide a service that they're not skilled in, and that's 100%. And even though we provide that end-to-end function, there are specialist areas that we refer out. You know, it could be a sophisticated employee ESOP plan or whatever the case may be, where we will make that introduction and we will work with the business owner, but we will still refer out. So I think it's acknowledging what each role is, and then putting your hand up if there is something that falls outside of that space, outside of that particular ambit.
Lielette, closing thoughts on collaboration before we cut off. Danielle, can we 1 minute, please?
I will go with, I'll finish up on Kelly Burge's comments in the chat as well, because it is interesting that accountants are dismissing, you know, bookkeepers and BAS agents. And unfortunately, we're probably going to see more of that because we are going to see a lot more accountants take on bookkeeping in-house themselves. So there's a little bit of resentment out there in the marketplace, which is why they will not talk to a standalone bookkeeping firm a lot of the times. Now, that's not everywhere. We work with some amazing accounting firms as well. I think the key here is if you've got front of mind that the client, ultimately, the client has to win out of this. And if the client wins and we don't all go chasing the dollars, then the dollars will follow us, because that to me is what we all need to be doing the best that we're good at. So I think, you know, that collaboration, what does it look like? It's actually picking up that phone, getting on, you know, having a coffee with that accounting firm or that CFO and go, right, this is what we're working on. This is what our scope is. Where does your scope start and finish? And that's how we actually work with those partners. So there's no overlap. The only overlap is in the discussions and going, what do you think we should do? This is what's happening with the business. I think you now should step in. That's what we do with the accountants. We go, the client's been making a loss month after month. What do you think we should do? Now, we can have those conversations, but we try and actually give respect to the accounting firm so they can step in and have their opportunity to shine as well, because they're charging for that service. So I think it's got to go both ways. You've really got to, I guess, bring the best out of each other, and you do that by communicating more. You don't sit in silos, as Michael was saying. You've got to get out there and ring those accountants or email them and catch up with a coffee and you know, it sounds hard work, but it's not. Once you do it, then they'll start feeding you more leads as well. So, and vice versa. So anyway, there's enough work out there for everyone, but we've got to stop being in silos. We've got to actually communicate and keep the client front of mind. As I said, the dollars will follow.
Right. Thanks, Lielette. Thanks, Rob. Thanks, Michael. Danielle, any passing comments? We will share the poll. I'm just sharing the PDF with you as well, so we'll get that out on email, because I think some of those results were actually quite insightful and quite useful, which of course we didn't know until we saw the results. Danielle, passing last thoughts.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks so much, everybody. This was clearly a discussion that had to happen. It was, obviously something a lot of people feel really strongly about, and an hour is certainly not enough time, but let's continue the discussion on LinkedIn. So let's keep talking about this. I will share the recording and the results with everybody after this session. So thank you for all your participation, everybody with their fantastic comments, and to our panels. So thanks, everybody. And